The UAE is in a race against itself to up its manufacturing game. From machine parts to pasta. The goal is singular: make it in the Emirates. That also happens to be the name of an event taking place this week. It's looking to encourage local manufacturing by incentivizing investors and global companies alike with the UAE's offerings. Now in its fourth edition, Make It in the Emirates is hosted by the Ministry of Industry and Advanced Technology. This year's forum is massive. It features more than 700 exhibitors across industries, with booths spread across 68,000 square meters at the Abu Dhabi National Exhibition Center, or ADNEC, 5 times larger than last year's event. It's part of a larger push by the country to be less reliant on international trade. Currently, the UAE imports a large majority of its goods and services from abroad. It aims to expand and diversify the UAE economy and position manufacturing as one of its strongest pillars. Today, we're hearing from both an expert and an innovator to learn about the UAE's national push behind this initiative, what it offers, and how entrepreneurs can benefit from it. I'm Salim Saeed, and from The National, this is Business Extra.
Investing in manufacturing is an investment in an advanced economy.
That's an English voiceover of Dr. Sultan Al-Jaber, Minister of Industry and Advanced Technology, speaking in Arabic on the event's opening day earlier this week. The push that's behind Make It in the Emirates is also behind something called Operation 300 Billion. It's the UAE's roadmap to raise the industrial sector's contribution to GDP from 133 billion dirham to 300 billion dirham by 2031, according to the government.
And advanced materials. The world.
So I think, again, if we take it back to Operation 300 billion, what we really see as part of that initiative is that it's not just about the UAE government wanting to expand manufacturing, or not just about wanting to expand manufacturing, but also expand manufacturing in specific areas.
That's Jean Walters. She's a senior economist at Emirates NBD, here to explain the big picture of all this.
Manufacturing in the UAE currently, or at least as of 2023, was the third largest sector in the UAE economy. That's after mining and quarrying and then retail and wholesale trade. And it comes in at a contribution of roughly 11% of nominal GDP. And we've seen the manufacturing sector's contribution to overall activity has actually risen in the last decade. So it's up from around 8% in 2014. Now, within the UAE, there's a fair amount of diversity between the individual emirates. So manufacturing in both Dubai and Abu Dhabi accounts for around 8% of those emirates' respective nominal GDPs. But in some of the smaller emirates, we see that the share of manufacturing is actually quite a lot larger. For example, the latest data that we have for Iraq suggests that its share of manufacturing in GDP is closer to around 27%. Whereas for Sharjah, it's about 16%. And again, for Sharjah and Ras Al Khaimah, that's consistent with the kind of industries we know are based there. So lots of steel, cement, ceramics, plastics, petrochemicals. In comparison to other large MENA region economies, the aggregate UAE share is somewhat smaller. So in Saudi Arabia in 2024, manufacturing accounted for somewhere in the region of 15 to 16% of nominal GDP. About half of that manufacturing was related to things like petrochemical production or refining activities, with the remaining 50% then other manufacturing. And similarly, in Egypt and Morocco, manufacturing accounted for in the region of 14 to 16% in their most recent national accounts data. But I do think it's worth highlighting that the smaller share of manufacturing in the UAE is not necessarily unusual. There is a fairly established pattern of wealthier countries having smaller manufacturing sectors, with the one exception probably being Germany. But in general, as more advanced economies tend to substitute away from producing goods to producing services.
When we look at the UAE specifically, how has the manufacturing sector evolved in the last decade? Was that the case like 10 or 15 years ago? Or is what we're seeing now in terms of manufacturing in the UAE relatively new?
I think it's going to probably vary by emirate. So we have longer historical data for Emirates like Dubai and Abu Dhabi. And in those Emirates, it certainly looks like in Dubai, the share of manufacturing has been probably fairly stable. Whereas in Abu Dhabi, we've definitely seen a significant increase in the share of manufacturing in Abu Dhabi's economic output. So it's increased from about, I think it was roughly 5% in 2014 to now being closer to 8%. And in Abu Dhabi in particular, what we saw was post-COVID a really marked jump in the growth of manufacturing activities. At some points year on year post-COVID, we saw really strong growth in Abu Dhabi's manufacturing sector.
And do you see any challenges or opportunities for further growth for that sector here in the UAE?
Yeah, I think we definitely see opportunity for further growth in the sector, both at an emirate level and in aggregate in the UAE. And a lot of that is going to be down to the initiatives that the UAE has put in place in recent years. So obviously we have things like Operation 300 billion, which is a UAE-wide initiative or industrial strategy really to try and expand the manufacturing sector's contribution in the economy to around 300 billion dirhams by 2031.
Do you think the UAE can become competitive in select industries on a global scale?
So there's a real focus on the UAE becoming a high quality, high tech, value added manufacturing economy. So, for example, Operation 300 billion has specifically highlighted, I think it's 11 sectors where they wanting to focus their efforts on. And those sectors tend to be things that are quite related to advanced manufacturing. So things like space manufacturing, medical technology, electronics, hydrogen production, all those sort of elements, as well as agricultural technology. So again, there's this real push to shift towards high-tech manufacturing in the UAE economy.
And what do you think would give the UAE a competitive edge here? Specifically, why should global investors or manufacturers consider the UAE as a global hub for manufacturing in these industries?
Yeah, so I think there's a couple of factors here. So I think one of the things we often talk about here is the fact that the UAE, and not just the UAE, the GCC more broadly, in fact, have this young, growing population. And that's important when we're thinking about high-tech manufacturing, because obviously the future generations are arguably going to be better placed to engage in those kind of manufacturing sectors. But they're also going to be the ultimate end consumers of high-tech manufacturing. And so in that way, the UAE is well placed because it's got this young and growing population. When companies look to where they want to place their manufacturing facilities, the UAE then stands out in terms of it's got a growing domestic potential to consume that manufacturing, but also it's well placed as a hub to export any manufacturing into other young and growing populations in the region. I think also the track record that we've seen in terms of foreign direct investment is pretty encouraging in this regard. When we look at some of the foreign direct investment statistics, specifically for greenfield foreign direct investment, so that's new production rather than simply acquiring a firm through mergers and acquisitions, what we see is that the share of manufacturing activity or investment related to manufacturing activity has increased steadily since about 2018 to 2023. So in fact, in 2023 was a real bumper year for manufacturing related foreign direct investment into the UAE. Almost 50% of foreign direct investment in that year, inflows into the UAE in that year, were somehow related to manufacturing activity, at least according to the Financial Times FDI Markets database. And you can already see that there has been an increase in foreign direct investment into manufacturing activity in the last couple of years.
Looking ahead, We've got Operation 300 billion, which is the UAE's industrial strategy aiming to get the industrial sector's GDP contribution to up to 300 billion dirhams by 2031. How do you see the government reaching that goal?
The Operation 300 billion is a key strategy to increase manufacturing activity in the UAE. And obviously, it is focused on high-tech industries that we've spoken about. I think the UAE government has already done a significant amount of work in setting the groundwork for that to become a reality. So when we think about the kinds of things that have happened in the last, let's say, 5 years, what we've seen is things like 100% foreign ownership being allowed, changes in visas. So now you've got not only a growing population, but also a population that is intent, arguably, on staying in the UAE for longer time. There's a whole set of initiatives or policy changes that have taken place in the last couple of years, which have really set up the UAE as an attractive place for both domestic manufacturers to expand, but also for foreign manufacturers to come in and leverage the region's comparative advantages.
We'll be back after this short break.
Are you looking for deeper insights into the biggest news stories shaping the Middle East?
The U.S. will take over the Gaza Strip.
Listen to Beyond the Headlines, a weekly current affairs podcast from the national news in Abu Dhabi.
Surrender is not an option.
We break down the news and bring you in-depth analysis and expert perspectives on everything from regional power shifts to ongoing conflicts, giving you the full picture behind the events shaping the Arab region. Listen to Beyond the Headlines every Friday on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or wherever you get your podcasts.
We've just heard from economist John Walters about the UAE's vision to bring manufacturing back home. And one entrepreneur is putting all that theory into practice.
Back in 2021, I was a fresh graduate, and I had this idea of revolutionizing the manufacturing industry.
This is Abdullah Al-Awadi. He's the founder of the AM Lab, which he's dubbed the
Uber of manufacturing.
It's a startup that offers on-demand custom parts to manufacturers, and it's based here in the UAE. Tell us about your background in this field. How did you get started?
To be honest, I stumbled on it through this program, and I was fortunate enough to be selected to participate as part of AdMath's STEAM program. And back then, I was just going through things, and when I realized that these technologies were not accessible to young entrepreneurs, to young innovators in the market, I realized that it needed to be. So how was it that we're going to be able to make these technologies accessible? And what are the main problems associated with having access to these technologies?
Yeah, with that said, can you tell us about the company that you founded, the Advanced Manufacturing Lab, the AM Lab? Tell us what that is and what you do there.
The AM Lab is the first digital manufacturing platform in the region.
This is a retired shipping container, and we have turned it into a factory, our AM factory.
We facilitate digital manufacturing through a digital platform that leverages AI. It's as simple as uploading a part, getting an instant quotation, and being able to have it delivered to your doorstep. Are tackling core issues with the supply chains, and especially right now with the American policies that are being passed globally with the tariffs and the increase in tariffs globally, we're starting to see a need for local manufacturing, and a greater need for that is through industry-specific use cases such as in oil and gas, F&B, R&D. So a lot of the supply chain is rigid. It's not very agile. We are highly dependent on neighboring countries such as India and China to manufacture and to even prototype, slowing down the iteration process. And as part of the innovation cycle or the product cycle itself, it's key for us to innovate, and it's key for us to iterate as much as possible. To be able to iterate is to be able to innovate. And I'm a strong believer in the iteration cycles that a product or a prototype must go through.
As a startup, you're solving a problem in an industry, right?
Mm-hmm.
And that's how I would imagine you pitch yourself. So say can you expand on that in terms of what problem you're solving, for example, for a manufacturer when they have to import from, as you said, from the region, from abroad? What does that mean for them in terms of costs, labor, time spent?
So one of the core issues that we're tackling here is RFQ process. It's a very traditional sourcing process that a lot of companies go through, whether it's through the tendering process that they have. What we have done is we have cut all the middlemen in a lot of ways. And I'd like to say that we're the only middleman that you have to go through to be able to get your product to its final stages. We have done that by leveraging AI and leveraging our instant quotation engine, which allows you to be able to, again, like I mentioned earlier, to receive instant quotations. But more than that, to have access to a library of materials that not one manufacturer will have. So imagine this. If we go to a manufacturer A, and manufacturer A has limited capabilities, whether through machinery or technology, and then you add another requirement or another limitation, which is materials. So that manufacturer might not have the material that you need to be able to meet that specific time frame that you have. So lead times does play a very important role in our overall solutions. We do cut that by around 60 to 70%. With that being said, we have seen a great uptake from the F&B industries, and we're able to, as of right now, see a increase in uptime of machineries. So instead of their existing machines being out for a few weeks, they're now out for a few days while we're able to reverse engineer and prototype and produce the parts that are missing. So from a customer's perspective, we address everything from A to Z, and even from a product development point of view, we also are able to have that under our umbrella.
So companies are spending millions on these machines to be able to print parts. And then manufacturers are importing from outside because they can't find local manufacturers for specific parts that they need. And they could be spending either hundreds of thousands or millions or whatever it is. So is that what you're doing? You're bridging that gap, and then you're utilizing the full capacity of those machines, essentially, and then also solving the problem of manufacturers having to overspend on parts?
That's exactly it. And what we're also saving a lot of institutions is the overhead associated with purchasing these machines. A lot of these machines require maintenance and an operator to be able to understand and optimize these machines for these specific parts. So in the case of the AM lab, we have simplified it in a way where you have access to all these different types of technologies. And today we're supporting 2 types of technology, and that is additive and sheet fabrication. We are looking to expand into subtractive manufacturing by Q4 of this year. We have been developing the algorithms for it to be able to reduce the entry barrier. One of the things that we're looking at is developing our DFM capabilities, and DFM stands for Design for Manufacturability. And that is a key aspect of designing or manufacturing using additives. So what we're able to do is we're able to analyze the parts, analyze the vertices, understand the mesh integrity, and to be able to predict whether this part would fail in the manufacturing process or be able to be optimized for another process. So these algorithms that we develop are highly linked to the capabilities of machines and the capabilities or the limitations of the machines and limitations of materials.
What stage would you say you're at now? For example, are you still seeking investors? Are you seeking more partners? What do you need?
We're right now seeking investment to be able to grow the platform. We have gotten to this point through raising through family and friends. We are very proud of what we have been able to achieve over the past 3 years. It's been 3 years in the making and 3 years of hard work and addressing core issues, breaking down machinery, trying to understand the components, sometimes not being able to put it back together, but we won't talk about those. But again, the whole process as a whole there's been a lot of R&D to be able to understand the software and also understand the hardware and how those two components work together.
Yeah, no, it sounds like an exciting journey, and we should revisit with you in like 5 years from now to see where you're at. You'll probably
Inshallah.
If you'll have time for us, because you'll be leading so many companies and such.
I'll always have the time for you, Sadeem. Thank you so much.
Of course, and thank you so much for joining us. This was really insightful.
I appreciate it.
Make It in the Emirates wraps up tomorrow, Thursday, May 22nd. And that's all for this episode of Business Extra. Be sure to spread the word about the show and follow us wherever you stream podcasts to get the latest episodes. This episode was produced by Yasmin Al-Taji, Duat Farid is our editor, Arthur Edison is our audio engineer, and I've been your host, Salim Al-Saeed.